Fame has a strange way of lying to us. It tells us that applause lasts forever, that legacy is loud, that the people we celebrate never disappear. But the truth is quieter. Some of the most important figures in culture don't leave with fireworks. They leave with unanswered questions, unfinished conversations, and choices most people never noticed while the cameras were rolling. This isn't just a tribute. It's a look at what gets remembered and what gets quietly erased. The moments that built history, the sacrifices that happened off-screen, the lives that mattered long after the spotlight moved on. And the first story proves something uncomfortable. Sometimes the bravest legacy isn't staying famous, it's knowing when to walk away. Demond Wilson, The Cost of Being the Anchor. To understand Demond Wilson, you have to understand restraint. On a television set overflowing with chaos, he was the one holding the line. While Red Fox detonated punchlines like fireworks, Wilson absorbed the blast. That wasn't accidental. It was craft, and it quietly reshaped television. Before Sanford & Son changed American sitcoms, Wilson's life already carried weight most audiences never imagined. Born in 1946, he wasn't just an actor who landed a role. He was a child prodigy tap dancer performing at the Apollo, a Vietnam veteran who survived combat with the 4th Infantry, a man who once nearly lost his life and made a promise that would haunt and guide him for decades. As Lamont Sanford, he wasn't playing the joke. He was the reality reacting to it. The son trapped between duty and exhaustion, love and frustration, laughter and limits. That balance gave Sanford & Son its emotional credibility. Without Wilson, the show collapses into noise. With him, it became revolutionary. But what audiences didn't see was how isolating that role became. Playing the straight man meant never being the star, even when the show needed you just as much. Wilson and Fox shared electric chemistry on screen. But off-screen, distance grew. Not scandal, not betrayal, just a silence that never quite healed. Wilson carried that silence with him. He didn't exploit it, he documented it. In his memoir, Second Banana, he acknowledged the pain of being essential and overlooked at the same time. That contradiction followed him long after the applause faded. And then he did something Hollywood never expects. He walked away. Not because the phone stopped ringing, but because the promise he made years earlier still mattered. In 1984, Wilson was ordained. He traded scripts for sermons, studios for sanctuaries, applause for purpose. While others chased relevance, he chose conviction. For decades, he lived out of the spotlight, traveling as an evangelist, speaking about faith, survival, and second chances. No reinventions, no comeback tours, just service. Now, that journey has ended. Demond Wilson has passed away from prostate cancer at 79. A soldier, a star, a servant. The jokes have stopped. The junkyard is quiet. And Lamont Sanford, the man who kept chaos grounded, has finally rested. But the silence he leaves behind still speaks. And what came next proves that sometimes the people who change culture the most are the ones history barely names. Woody King Jr., the architect who stayed invisible. History loves faces. It remembers stars, applause, and marquee names. But the soul of American theater, especially Black theater, wasn't built by celebrity. It was engineered by someone willing to stay out of the spotlight so others could finally step into it. Woody King Jr. understood that trade-off early. Born in Alabama in 1937 and hardened by the industrial grind of Detroit, King didn't enter the arts through privilege or polish. He worked with his hands, arc welding at Ford by day, theater by calling. And the contrast mattered, because when he finally planted his flag in New York in 1970, he wasn't chasing applause, he was creating oxygen. The new Federal Theater wasn't just a venue, it was a declaration, a space where stories ignored everywhere else could finally breathe. While mainstream stages hesitated, King moved. While others asked for permission, he built infrastructure. He didn't wait for representation, he manufactured it. Over decades, that decision quietly rewired American culture. King produced hundreds of performances, plays that challenged, provoked, and refused to soften their edges. He nurtured talent long before the world was ready to celebrate it. Careers launched from his stages didn't happen by accident. They happened because someone believed early, invested fully, and demanded excellence without compromise. And yet, the paradox followed him everywhere. The more successful his artist became, the more invisible his role grew. Awards eventually came, honors that tried to summarize a lifetime of cultural engineering into brief speeches and polished plaques. But even then, King wasn't chasing validation. His real achievement wasn't trophies, it was permanence. The fact that voices once shut out were now unavoidable. Behind the scenes, he carried the weight that comes with leadership without fame. Funding battles, institutional resistance, the exhaustion of always pushing uphill. King didn't just direct plays. He directed momentum in a system designed to stall it. And then, quietly, the work caught up to the body. On January 29, 2026, complications from heart surgery ended the life of the man who had spent decades amplifying everyone else's voice. Woody King Jr. was 88. No curtain call, no final monologue, just the sudden absence of someone who had been holding doors open for generations. Broadway will dim its lights. Theater programs will list his name. But the real legacy is harder to measure. It's the careers that exist because he refused to accept silence. The stories that survived because he built a stage strong enough to carry them. And what comes next reminds us that some legacies don't whisper. They stare back at you. Because the next loss didn't just shape stories. He became unforgettable in a single look. 2. Woody King Jr., the architect who stayed invisible. History loves faces. It remembers stars, applause, and marquee names. But the soul of American theater, especially Black theater, wasn't built by celebrity. It was engineered by someone willing to stay out of the spotlight so others could finally step into it. Woody King Jr. understood that trade-off early. Born in Alabama in 1937 and hardened by the industrial grind of Detroit, King didn't enter the arts through privilege or polish. He worked with his hands, arc welding at Ford by day, theater by calling. And the contrast mattered, because when he finally planted his flag in New York in 1970, he wasn't chasing applause. He was creating oxygen. The new Federal Theater wasn't just a venue, it was a declaration, a space where stories ignored everywhere else could finally breathe. While mainstream stages hesitated, King moved. While others asked for permission, he built infrastructure. He didn't wait for representation, he manufactured it. Over decades, that decision quietly rewired American culture. King produced hundreds of performances, plays that challenged, provoked, and refused to soften their edges. He nurtured talent long before the world was ready to celebrate it. Careers launched from his stages didn't happen by accident. They happened because someone believed early, invested fully, and demanded excellence without compromise. And yet, the paradox followed him everywhere. The more successful his artist became, the more invisible his role grew. Awards eventually came, honors that tried to summarize a lifetime of cultural engineering into brief speeches and polished plaques. But even then, King wasn't chasing validation. His real achievement wasn't trophies, it was permanence. The fact that voices once shut out were now unavoidable. Behind the scenes, he carried the weight that comes with leadership without fame. Funding battles, institutional resistance, the exhaustion of always pushing uphill. King didn't just direct plays, he directed momentum in a system designed to stall it. And then, quietly, the work caught up to the body. On January 29, 2026, complications from heart surgery ended the life of the man who had spent decades amplifying everyone else's voice. Woody King Jr. was 88. No curtain call, no final monologue, just the sudden absence of someone who had been holding doors open for generations. Broadway will dim its lights, theater programs will list his name, but the real legacy is harder to measure. It's the careers that exist because he refused to accept silence, the stories that survived because he built a stage strong enough to carry them. And what comes next reminds us that some legacies don't whisper, they stare back at you. Because the next loss didn't just shape stories, he became unforgettable in a single look. 3. Gerardo Terracena, the face you never escaped. Some actors speak with dialogue, others speak with movement, and then there are the rare ones who say everything without opening their mouths. Gerardo Terracena belonged to that last category. You didn't just watch him, you felt him. Born in Mexico City in 1970, Terracena never treated acting as a shortcut to fame. His craft was physical, disciplined, almost ritualistic. Long before international audiences knew his name, he was training his body to communicate emotion the way dancers do, through tension, rhythm, stillness. His time with the Peruvian dance group Integro didn't just shape his movement, it rewired how he understood storytelling itself. That training made him dangerous on screen. When Apocalypto arrived, audiences weren't prepared. Terracena's performance as Middle-Eyed didn't rely on speeches or exposition. It relied on presence, a stare that lingered too long, a calm that felt predatory. He didn't play a villain, he embodied one. The kind that makes your pulse tighten even when he isn't speaking. That role alone could have locked him into a single lane. Hollywood loves to freeze actors in whatever frightens audiences most. But Terracena refused to stay contained. He moved between worlds effortlessly, ancient jungles to modern cityscapes, art house intensity to mainstream brutality. Films like Man on Fire and Narcos Mexico showed the same thing again and again. He could dominate a frame without demanding attention. What made him exceptional wasn't volume, it was control. He understood restraint, how stillness could be more threatening than motion, how silence could scream louder than dialogue. Over a career spanning more than 30 theatrical works, Terracena built a reputation among filmmakers as someone who elevated material simply by existing within it. And yet, like many actors who refuse to flatten themselves into a single brand, his name never became as famous as his face. Audiences recognized him instantly. Casting directors trusted him, but superstardom never fully arrived. Not because of lack of talent, but because Terracena chose depth over exposure. He remained loyal to projects that respected his craft, even when they offered less spotlight. Then, suddenly, there was nothing more to watch. Gerardo Terracena has passed away at just 55 years old. No farewell performance, no final transformation, just the abrupt end of a presence that once filled every frame it entered. Cinema lost more than an actor. It lost a language, a way of communicating menace, sorrow, and humanity without explanation. And what followed next reminds us that not all energy is quiet. Some losses are loud enough to shake an entire nation. 4. Fatih Yürek, a nation's rhythm goes silent. Some performers don't just entertain a country, they energize it. The moment they walk on stage, the air changes. The lights feel brighter, the crowd leans in. Fatih Yürek was that kind of presence. He didn't blend into the background of Turkish pop culture, he powered it. Born in 1966, Yürek came up through nightlife, where charisma isn't optional, it's survival. Those early years shaped him into something fearless. When he arrived in Istanbul, he didn't ask for permission. He exploded onto the scene. Songs like Hadi Hadi and Sus weren't just hits. They became shared experiences, blasted from radios, weddings, taxis, and late-night streets. His iconic snake dance and unapologetic flamboyance shattered expectations and expanded what pop stardom could look like in Turkey. But his reach didn't stop at music. Urek became a daily companion in millions of homes through television. As the magnetic host of Gelinim Mutfakta and Gelin Görümce, he blurred the line between celebrity and family. Viewers didn't just watch him, they trusted him. He laughed with contestants, teased them, defended them. He understood that entertainment wasn't about distance, it was about connection. That connection made him beloved across generations. Younger fans admired his boldness. Older viewers respected his warmth. He could command a concert hall one night and feel like a familiar voice in your living room the next morning. But behind the sequins and smiles, a private battle was unfolding. In October 2025, Urek suffered a massive heart attack. What followed wasn't public drama or headlines. It was a long, grueling fight for survival in a hospital room. For more than 3 months, the man who once filled stages with energy fought quietly for breath. No cameras, no applause, just resilience. And then the fight ended. Fatih Urek passed away at 59, leaving behind a silence that even icons struggled to describe. Fellow performers spoke not just of loss, but of absence, as if a frequency had dropped out of the national signal. Turkey didn't just lose a singer or a host, it lost a rhythm. A man who taught people that joy could be loud, colorful, and unapologetic. That life, even when difficult, should be lived at full volume. And the next story reminds us that sometimes laughter itself becomes a historical artifact. 5. Fernando Esteso, the laughter that carried a nation. Some comedians arrive at the right moment. Others become the moment. Fernando Esteso belonged to the second kind. His career didn't just track Spain's transition into a new era. It helped people survive it with laughter. Born in Zaragoza in 1945, Esteso was performing before most children learned to read. By the age of 4, he was already on stage beside his father, wearing a clown's nose and learning something instinctive: how to feel a crowd. That circus DNA never left him. It shaped his timing, his physicality, and his uncanny ability to turn embarrassment into art. Madrid's stages gave him early recognition, but it was his explosive partnership with Andrés Pajares that transformed him into a cultural force. Together, they dominated the Destape era, a time when Spain was shedding decades of repression and discovering freedom in messy, awkward, sometimes outrageous ways. Their films weren't subtle, they weren't polished, but they were honest reflections of a society trying to breathe again. Titles like Los Vingueros and Yo hice a Roque Tres weren't critical darlings. They didn't need to be. They were communal events. Millions showed up because Esteso's characters looked like them, sounded like them, struggled like them. He played the mischievous everyman, flawed, loud, ridiculous, and deeply human. For the working class, he wasn't mocking their reality, he was validating it. And the laughter mattered. In a country redefining itself, humor became release. Esteso's physical comedy, exaggerated expressions, and fearless absurdity allowed people to laugh at things they were still afraid to name out loud. His influence didn't stop with film. Music became another outlet for his surreal charm. Novelty songs like La Ramona and El Tiroliro lodged themselves into Spain's collective memory, impossible to forget even decades later. They weren't meant to be timeless masterpieces. They were meant to be fun, and they succeeded. As the years passed, the spotlight softened, the crowds thinned, and like many comedians, Esteso's later life carried quieter sorrows. The loss of his wife, Maria José, marked him deeply. The man who gave a nation laughter learned what it meant to live without it. Now, that laughter has gone still. Fernando Esteso has passed away, closing a chapter that captured Spain at one of its most vulnerable, transformative moments. He wasn't just a comedian, he was a time capsule, a reminder of who people were when the rules changed and joy felt dangerous again. And the next story proves that in the digital age, even a perfect life can vanish in a single moment. 6. Julia Berta, when a perfect feed turns into a warning. On a screen, everything looked ideal. Warm light, gentle routines, a smiling mother balancing elegance and everyday chaos. To tens of thousands of followers, Julia Berta wasn't just an influencer, she was reassurance, proof that love, beauty, and stability could coexist if you curated life carefully enough. Born in 1987, Julia built her online world far from her roots. Naples became her canvas, sunlit streets, family moments, the quiet intimacy of motherhood. She wasn't selling excess, she was selling harmony, a cross-cultural love story with her Italian husband Giuseppe and the tender rhythms of raising their daughter. Her content felt personal, not performative, and that's why people trusted it. But perfection online often hides pressure offline. Behind the filters was a growing fixation many never saw: the pursuit of refinement, control, the idea that one more adjustment could finally make everything complete. Julia returned to Moscow not for nostalgia, but for transformation. She documented the trip casually: coffee at a cafe, a cheerful greeting to the city. Nothing dramatic, nothing alarming. That post would become her last. During what was supposed to be a routine cosmetic procedure at a private clinic, something went catastrophically wrong. Julia suffered a sudden, severe reaction. Within hours, the life her followers thought they knew was gone. Then the truth began to unravel. Investigators opened a case after uncovering something chilling. The man who performed the procedure allegedly had no medical degree, no license, no legal authority to operate. What initially appeared to be a tragic complication quickly exposed something far darker: a system that failed at every level. This wasn't bad luck, it was negligence. Julia Berta passed away at just 38 years old, not in secrecy, not quietly, but in full view of a digital world that watched her final moments unfold without realizing what they were witnessing. Now her feed reads differently. Smiles feel heavier, captions feel fragile. What once inspired now warns. The likes and comments have transformed into a digital vigil filled with grief, disbelief, and anger. She leaves behind a family shattered by trust betrayed, a daughter too young to understand why her mother didn't come home, and a story that forces an uncomfortable question: how much danger hides behind the illusion of perfection? And the final story brings us back to America, to a life defined not by illusion, but by endurance. 7. Tom Selleck, the long road chosen on purpose. Some careers burn fast and disappear. Others stretch quietly across decades, built not on hype, but on decisions made when no one was watching. Tom Selleck's life belongs to the second kind, not because it was easy, but because he chose stability over spectacle again and again. Born in Detroit in 1945 and raised in Southern California, Selleck looked destined for something solid and conventional. He was tall, athletic, disciplined. A basketball scholarship to USC pointed toward business, not Hollywood. Acting wasn't a childhood obsession, it was an accident, a suggestion, a door he didn't rush through, but eventually stepped into. The early years were humbling. Commercials, one-scene television appearances, long stretches of rejection. He learned patience before fame ever found him. And when it finally did, with Magnum P.I., it arrived at a cost few people remember. Just as the series launched, Selleck was offered the role of Indiana Jones, a career-altering moment. He turned it down to honor his television contract. Harrison Ford became a legend. Selleck stayed put. At the time, it looked like a loss. In hindsight, it revealed something fundamental about him. He valued commitment more than opportunity. Magnum P.I. didn't just make him famous, it made him trusted. The show worked because Selleck didn't play a superhero. He played a man carrying quiet damage, a Vietnam veteran hiding weight behind humor, strength without bravado, vulnerability without confession. America responded to that balance. Film stardom flirted with him next. Some projects landed, others didn't. Instead of chasing blockbuster validation, Selleck recalibrated. 3 Men and a Baby proved he could lead a film, but he never let success dictate his identity. When television called again years later, he answered without ego. Roles like Jesse Stone stripped away charm and replaced it with weariness, silence, moral fatigue. Selleck leaned into aging rather than fighting it. And then came Blue Bloods, a role that felt less like acting and more like a rival. Frank Reagan wasn't flashy, he was steady. A man balancing authority, loss, and responsibility. A reflection of the values Selleck himself lived by. Off-screen, the choices were even clearer. While Hollywood chased visibility, Selleck chased privacy. He married quietly, raised his daughter away from cameras, bought land instead of headlines. The Ventura County Ranch wasn't a retreat, it was a declaration. Work the soil, grow something real, measure success in seasons, not ratings. His political views made him unpopular in some circles. He didn't retreat, he didn't shout. He accepted the consequences without apology. In an industry built on reinvention, Selleck refused to perform outrage or conformity. He stayed consistent, and consistency over time became his signature. Now in his late 70s, he's still working, still respected, still grounding every scene he enters. The mustache is silver, the voice deeper, the presence unchanged. While others faded chasing relevance, Selleck endured by never chasing it at all. His story doesn't end with tragedy, it ends with intention. A life built deliberately. A career sustained by restraint. Proof that sometimes the road not taken isn't a regret. It's the reason everything else holds together. What remains when the noise fades? These lives couldn't be more different. A sitcom anchor who chose faith over fame. A theater architect who stayed invisible so others could shine. A performer whose silence spoke louder than words. A national icon whose joy masked private battles. A comedian who helped a country laugh through transformation. A digital life that vanished behind a curated illusion. And a man who proved longevity comes from knowing when not to reach. Together, they tell one story. Legacy isn't always loud. Sometimes it's restraint. Sometimes it's sacrifice. Sometimes it's the choice to step away, to build quietly, or to stay when leaving would be easier. History remembers names, but meaning lives in decisions. And the real question isn't who we lose next. It's what we choose to carry forward when the applause finally stops.
Thank you, my viewer. I hope you keep it here on my channel for more discoveries on all the celebrities' untold journeys. Like, comment, and subscribe on Hajararama channel. Thank you so much.